because he grew up being told that black people had extra muscles, and so that's why we were able to do certain things.
With my mug on. What's up? Welcome to the Menace to Society podcast. Today you are here with your greatest host, the great Chris Joseph, a third-year accounting scholar at the Florida State University with a minor in religion on the pre-law track. And I am so grateful to have here with a great guest, guys. Let's give it a round of applause for Adarius Simpkins, man. Woo!
That's a great introduction. Thank you. Thank you.
How you doing today?
I'm all right. I can't complain.
Would you
Here to
like
come.
to, introduce yourself, state your position, what titles you hold, maybe where you did undergrad, grad, all of that?
So my name is Adarius Simpkins, as was previously stated. I am currently a second-year doctoral student in the Educational Leadership and Administration program here at Florida State. I received my master's from Florida State in higher education with the emphasis in student affairs. I began my educational career at the University of South Carolina, where I earned a political science bachelor's degree with an emphasis in American politics and a minor in African American studies.
That's real. Thank you so much for that. So, as you know, the topic of this podcast today is really to talk about you in your role as a black male. How do you operate in your role? How do you just walk in your everyday skin? Just your responsibilities, how you feel. A lot of those topics. Feel free to say whatever's on your mind, whatever crosses your mind. Just this is really just more of a conversation for real. So I think I want to start it off, and I want my first question to be, how would you define black male leadership?
That's interesting. So, um, I think when I see black men in positions of leadership, I think one thing that is consistent is this idea of it being like a community experience, I guess you could say. I notice a lot of us tend to go into things for the purpose of making life better for somebody else, or we tend to also go into whether it's a formal type of mentorship or informal, like you always want to be trying to like put people on that are coming behind you, or really get connected with people that have been in your shoes before. So I would say it's very communal, black male leadership. I know people have referred to it as like a John Henry type mentality. Um, I've
Mm.
noticed that too, which is not necessarily the best. But we're working through it. I think identifying a problem is the first step to fixing it. So, um, that's something else I would say, but it's definitely unique, I think, compared to other people or groups that I've seen in positions of leadership.
And for all of our viewers that aren't familiar with John Henry, if I'm correct, it's the story about the man who literally kept
Hmm.
call it picking or whatever. He literally went through an entire mountain to create a train track or space for a train track railroad or whatever, and literally killed himself in doing it because he worked himself so much, right? Something like that.
Yep.
That story. If you don't know that story, look it up. John Henry, great story. But I find it interesting how you said that, because do you feel like that's something we specifically do as black males, and that's something more particular to us in comparison to our counterparts?
I would absolutely say so. I think a lot of times we take on more responsibility to, I'm not going to say to prove that we can, but I do think a lot of times we tend to define how much of a man you are by how much adversity or how much you're able to withstand before you break. Which again kind of goes back to that John Henry piece. I think we're also a lot of times, and for a lot of different reasons, some of us can be resistant to like opening up to other people and saying like, hey, actually, this is a great opportunity. I don't have the energy or the space for this right now. Like that's not something a lot of us can say, myself included sometimes. Um, and yeah, and I can't obviously speak for groups that I'm not a part of, but I definitely do think I've noticed that amongst other black men, but also within myself in different spaces.
That's real interesting, and I think I could agree with it. And I feel like within the bubble of just Black FSU as a whole, I think it's something that is glorified really, I think
Hmm.
that's it's something that's very glorified, and I think it's even more glorified for the lower classmen because they look at it as, oh, that's where I need to get to. And I think
Hmm.
a lot of the times, I think it does. The mindset does shift a little bit as you go into the upperclassmen because, like, if I see somebody or if I see somebody doing 5+ positions, and I know I've been in that space before where I've also done that, and it's like, dang, I was like, dang, I feel bad for the person because it's like I know what that looks like, and it's like,
Hmm.
dang, I don't want that person doing that. So I think it gets less glorified as you do get older, but I think within this bubble, that's how it kind of is. I I wonder how that look. I don't know how much it looks out in the real world for real, but I think it's something. It's probably along the same lines of glorification at the beginning, and then towards as you get older, you get more mature, you start to realize that, dang, mm, really should.
Yeah, I would say it's really not that much different. I know for me, a part of it is the pressure to go and get another degree. Like, okay, I got free time right now, and I know I probably need to better myself in some way. But something my therapist actually challenged me with, I think it was our last session. Because I've been telling them that, like, obviously I'm struggling in this doctoral program. Like, it's kicking my behind, hockey.
Right.
Um, but I was telling him how, after I get this degree, I think I want to go get another master's degree. Basically because, I want to incorporate more like mental health type of stuff into what I'm doing. And he basically was asking, like, okay, are you doing that because you want to do it, or are you doing it because you like feeling useful? And that's a way that you can prove that you're useful to people instead of just being who you are. And so I just kind of had to sit with that because it's like going back to that previous point, I think a lot of times we correlate masculinity with the ability to provide and the ability to meet a need rather than just being ourselves, you know?
How would you describe how the world purviews black masculinity, and how would you say you potentially, how do you produce your authentic black masculinity?
Mhm. So I think a lot of how I guess the world views black men specifically really does go back kind of to slavery, I would say. Again, you're measured by your productivity. So again, how much things are you able to accomplish? How much are you able to do? Um, I think there's also the physicality of it all. So again, like how much are you able to withstand? So like we really and it's tough because these are obviously good qualities to have, but we're extremely resilient. Even ambition can kind of to an excessive extent can be a bad thing, but like some things along those lines. I think we're also kind of reduced to our bodies a lot of the time. Obviously, the push towards being involved in sports or um, even the perception of black men as being more violent, I think a lot of times has to do with how we physically show up within spaces. I remember growing up, like I had somebody ask me one time about the extra muscle I had in my legs that like made me jump higher because he grew up being told that black people had extra muscles, and so that's why we were able to do certain things. Because again, you have people spreading purposeful misinformation about who we are so that that can then be used to discriminate against us later on down the line. Because I don't think that there is a answer for how a man is supposed to show up. I think you just supposed to show up. I'm sorry, supposed to show up as whatever authentic version of you exists today. And so a lot of that I've started to journal more, going to therapy, and just being more intentional in my thoughts and actions. And I'm not perfect by any means. I still have things to obviously, work through, get better at doing, or get better at not doing. Um, but I think having that level of intentionality, and to ask myself why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, or why do I think the things that I think, and then working backwards from that before I make a decision or a choice, um, is also something that I think has helped me become more in tune with who I am as an individual and how masculinity shows up for me from an authentic space.
If you could think about like your community and the people you surround yourself, in what way would you say they influence the way you portray yourself as a black male?
I think I have a community of people that are also authentic in how who they are and how they show up, and so it makes it easier for me to be authentic around authentic people. And then say too, I often do have to check myself because I'm around people that are very high achievers, and
Mhm.
so that can kind of go back to the other piece of like, okay, well, if this person is doing more than me, that means obviously this is not the case, but oh, they're doing more than me, so they're better than me in this area, which may be true. Um, but then also, I guess having intentional conversations with them about kind of like again where their headspace is at, so that we can see like yes, just because we're doing these things doesn't necessarily mean that it's always the best mental health space wise. So we're able to one hold each other accountable from a um not comparing ourselves without a full picture standpoint, but then also being able to be vulnerable and authentic with each other. And when I say authentic, in this case, I mean from the standpoint of where's your mental space at? Kind of what are the underlying things that are going on, and then what are the experiences that you've had that have led you to this point? Because some things we do is really just a deeper trauma response, and so kind of figuring those things out together in a community.
Do you think we as a community, especially black men, do you think we deal with a lot of, like you say, like built up trauma that we don't address, but we still act on?
Absolutely, I think that's true for everybody, but I think too, I think a lot of the things that lead to black men having these experiences is again we normalize struggle. I think sometimes. Furthermore, I think that I know for me, I was always told, oh, growing up, if I ever experienced something that was like sad or made me angry, like you kind of just have to sit with those feelings and you don't really get taught how to process them. And I don't think they ever go anywhere. They just kind of sit within the body. And so sometimes, we'll be in a completely different environment, a completely different circumstance, but it'll trigger some of the same sort of, I guess, emotional buttons. Um, and we'll be upset and not even really be able to know why because the why happened 10, 15 years ago? Um, so yeah, I would definitely say so.
Like just be like rejection. Like as a kid, elementary, went through rejection and took it horribly. And so it's like now I don't even like rejection. Like I don't even sometimes I might not even do something because of the fear of rejection. No, I definitely agree. I definitely understand. How would you influence the appearance and presentation of those around you?
I'm a really big person on I don't believe in yucking people's young. So I personally think that people should be able to show up authentically themselves regardless of the space. And so I'll say professionally. The push for black men to be extremely like clean cut, Caesar cut, maybe waves if we're gonna be, flashy a little bit, maybe a singular stud earring, whatever the case may be, blase blase. I don't believe in listening to dead white people on how I'm supposed to show up in my day-to-day life. And I think a lot of those standards come from white people who are no longer among the living.
Mhm.
And so I think as long as you're able to do the job, I think that should be the most important thing. And I think we should create more spaces for people to show up authentically and still be professionals at the end of the day. And so I'll even use you as an example. Like the fact that you show up to school in wicks and goals and a suit, I love that. And I would never try to convince you to be anything beyond that because I think one, it's important for people to see that how you look has nothing to do with how you will actually work or enact a particular job or policy or whatever the case may be. Two, I think you will actually be a much better professional because you're not trying to water yourself down for the comfort of, again, dead white people, essentially. Um, and three, I think that also sends a message to people coming after you that's like, okay, yeah, I can still express my own sense of individuality, purpose, and a connection to my culture while still being successful within a space that may or may not value that. Um, and so I guess to answer your question, I think just by, and I hate that I keep using this answer, but just being authentic and letting and giving other people the space to be authentic.
I look back on my younger self and I'd be like, this is the person I wanted to be. Like this is how I viewed myself. And it's like I didn't have the opportunity to be that person when I was younger. So it's now I'm taking the opportunity to be that person that I always wanted to be. Good. Would you say does faith influence how you perceive your masculinity?
I don't, I would say maybe. So the aspect of masculinity where you kind of have to be a provider of something. I think that kind of comes from a more spiritual place for me. Um, because I believe that I'm somebody that only exists because of the prayers of generations of people that have never got to even meet me, because of the work and the lives of again countless people before me. And so it would be wrong of me to not want to spread that to other people, to not, speak positively over other people, to not use what resources I have to help other people or, just being there. And I think that like I said, that just comes from a very spiritual place for me, both in terms of just Christianity, but then also, um, just, I don't know, just where my kind of heart lies. And again, how I was raised. Because I was raised by, very spiritually tapped in people. And so I think that really is what grounds a lot of the things that I do. And also just the belief that we're all essentially connected in some way. So even though if I don't know you, like the fact that our lives just happen to cross at this particular point, I don't think anything like that happens for no reason. Just because I think the world is too complex for you to just connect with somebody again just for no reason. So So yeah, I believe that there's a deeper meaning and purpose for everything. And again, just being the best asset that you can be to someone when you have the opportunity to. I think that kind of ties back to that faith piece.
How would you say, how has mentorship, being mentored, or mentoring other Black males shaped your leadership style?
It's definitely, I would say, it's made it more intentional. Because on one hand, the people that I am mentored by, they've been very affirming, and it's easier to do my job because I know it can be done. You know, like if Dr. Brown can become the assistant dean of undergraduate studies, or he can become the dean of undergraduate studies, I can do this little assistant director thing. It may be difficult now, but I know that greater is possible. Or Dr. Brandon Bowden, he's the associate VP for student affairs. Again, if he can do his job, if he can work from a graduate, well, really not even a graduate assistant, if he can go from a student worker in the student union to being basically running half the university, again,
Right.
I can make this stuff happen because I have their mentorship and their guidance to follow. Secondly, because of the people that I mentor, it also gives me an extra checkpoint of like, okay, you just told Chris that he needed to go journal and sit with his feelings for a little bit and really think through kind of what he's experiencing right now. What right do you have to tell him that, but then not do it? So like,
Mhm.
okay, it adds a level of accountability. But the flip side of that too is I do feel like sometimes, and this is an extra check that I've had to come to terms with over time, the more people that you have looking up to you, it can feel like the more eyes you have on you for like all of your mistakes and your flaws and whatnot, like it can sometimes make you feel like more people are aware of that. And that's just really not true. Um, Even if you're not necessarily the most perfect person all the time, nobody is, and two, it doesn't negate all of the positive strengths and talents and qualities that you have just because you may have slipped up in this one particular area. Um, and so being mentored has really taught me all of those things.
My last question to you is, what advice would you give to future Black leaders?
I think I want to say therapy, but whatever that looks like for you. Some people that means going and sitting on somebody's couch. To other people, that's, developing like a consistent workout routine. For other people, that's, baking, cooking, doing whatever, all those little self-care things. I think that you have to pour as much, if not more, energy into yourself than you pour out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that it's okay to rest. And I think that we also don't talk enough about how important joy is to the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yes, the world is on fire in a lot of different ways, literally and figuratively. But at the same time, there is so much to still be happy about. And there are opportunities for us to take time to breathe and pause and dance, sing, paint, do whatever the case is to, again, like refresh yourself from an emotional standpoint. Um, because I think a lot of times we think of Black leaders specifically as these like really stoic, um, always serious all the time type people. Like I'm gonna use Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Like again, we think of them as just these men in suits or whatever. Like I'm sure they just play with their kids sometimes. They both of them probably knew how to play spades. I'm assuming. Um, so yeah, like again, our leaders and the people we look up to weren't these gods among men. Like they were just people at the end of the day who decided this was the mission that they wanted to go on, the path that they wanted to take. And I think that the same opportunities are exist for us, but I think that we have to have a healthy sense of joy and self-care in order to do those things and do those things well.
That's very real. Well, thank you for coming on the show today, man. That is another episode of Menace to Society. Thank you for checking this out. Make sure to tune back in next week for another episode. And peace out.